The scent of hay and old wood filled Yoren Fallow's lungs as he stretched in the pre-dawn darkness, but it was the voice that pulled him fully awake, sharp and irritated from somewhere above his head. "You snore." He froze, one boot halfway on, and tilted his head toward the ladder that led to the hayloft. The barn was his, had been his father's before him, and he knew every creak of its timbers. He also knew he had fallen asleep on the workbench again, hunched over the broken plow blade he had been trying to mend by lamplight. "You trespass," he called back, unable to keep the smile from his voice. Silence answered him. Then a rustling, the whisper of hay shifting under weight. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and climbed the ladder with slow deliberation. The first pale light of dawn filtered through gaps in the roof boards, painting everything in shades of gray and gold. She was sitting up in the hay pile he kept for winter fodder, and even in the dim light he could see the green of her skin, the small tusks that jutted from her lower lip, the pointed ears that swiveled toward him like a cat's. Her dark hair was a mess of tangles, and she clutched a threadbare blanket around her shoulders, an orc in his hayloft, looking at him with eyes that were more wary than hostile. "How long?" he asked. She lifted her chin. 3 nights. 3. He rubbed his jaw, felt the scrape of stubble. "And you only complained about the snoring this morning. It got worse." Despite himself, he laughed. The sound surprised them both. She blinked, and some of the wariness leaked out of her posture. He could see her more clearly now. Young, maybe his age or a little less. Thin in a way that spoke of too many missed meals. Her clothes were patched and road-worn, and she had no pack that he could see. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Verna Prawl. "Yoren Fallow. I own this farm," he gestured around the loft, "and this barn. And technically the hay you have been sleeping in, I know." Her voice was quiet now, defensive. "I will leave." "Did I say that?" She stared at him. He descended the ladder halfway, then stopped and looked back up at her. "Come down. If you have been here 3 nights, you must be hungry for something more than whatever you have been sneaking from the root cellar." "I did not. The carrots do not walk away on their own, Verna." He said her name carefully, like he was tasting it. "Come on. I make decent porridge." He did not wait for her answer. He climbed down, crossed the barn, and pushed open the door into the cool morning. The farmhouse stood 30 paces away, small and sturdy, smoke beginning to curl from its chimney where he had banked the fire the night before. Behind it, his fields stretched toward the eastern hills, still mostly fallow from the spring planting. It had been a difficult year. The rains had come late, and half his seed had rotted in the ground before it could sprout. He heard her follow him. Her footsteps were quiet, almost silent on the hard, packed earth. When he glanced back, she was standing in the barn doorway, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, watching him with those careful eyes. "You are not going to chase me off?" she asked. "With what? A rake?" He shook his head. "You look like you need the rest more than I need an empty loft." She followed him inside, moving like she expected a trap. The farmhouse was spare but clean. One room for living and cooking, with a ladder up to a sleeping loft of his own. He stirred the fire, added wood, and hung the porridge pot over the flames. Verna stood near the door, still wrapped in her blanket. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the table. She sat. He poured water from the pitcher, added oats and a pinch of salt, and stirred. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. When the porridge was ready, he ladled it into 2 bowls and set one in front of her along with a spoon. She ate like someone who had learned not to trust where the next meal was coming from, quick and efficient. He ate more slowly, watching her from the corner of his eye. "Where are you traveling to?" he asked. "Nowhere." She did not look up from her bowl. "Anywhere, it does not matter. Running from something, walking away from it." He let that sit. After a moment, she looked up at him, and there was something sharp and challenging in her gaze. "You do not mind? An orc in your barn?" "I minded the snoring complaint more than the orc," he said. Seemed rude given the circumstances. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. They finished eating in silence. When she pushed her bowl away, he said, "You can stay, in the loft I mean, until you figure out where you are going." "Why? Because it is empty and you are not." He shrugged. "And because you already have been staying there, so it seems pointless to throw you out now." She studied him for a long moment. He could see her turning it over, looking for the angle, the trick. Finally, she said, "I do not have money." "Did I ask for any? People always want something." "Then earn your keep," he said. "I have more work than I can manage alone, and my back has been reminding me of that fact with increasing frequency. You help with the farm, and you can stay in the loft. Fair trade." She considered this. Then she unwrapped the blanket from her shoulders and stood. In the morning light streaming through the window, he could see that she was not tall, perhaps half a head shorter than him, and built lean like a distance runner. Her shirt was too large, and her trousers were held up with a length of rope. "Fair trade," she agreed. That was how it began. The work was not easy. The farm was small, but it demanded constant attention. Fences needed mending, the vegetable garden needed weeding, the chickens needed feeding, and their coop needed cleaning. Verna threw herself into it with a determination that surprised him. She did not complain, did not ask for instruction. She simply watched what he did and then did it herself. By the end of the first week, his back did indeed feel better. By the end of the second, they had fallen into a rhythm. He woke before dawn, started the fire, and began the morning chores. She climbed down from the loft shortly after, still wrapped in that threadbare blanket, and joined him. They worked through the morning, ate a simple lunch, and worked through the afternoon. In the evening he cooked while she washed at the pump, and then they ate together at his table. She did not talk much. When she did, it was about the work, about what needed doing next. But he learned things about her anyway, in the way she moved, in the small choices she made. She was left-handed. She had a habit of humming tunelessly when she thought no one was listening. She was afraid of the rooster, though she tried to hide it. He told her about the farm, about his father who had worked it before him, about the year the river had flooded and drowned half the valley. She listened without comment, but he could tell she was listening. One morning, nearly a month after she had arrived, he woke to find her already in the barn mucking out the stalls. The sun was not yet up, and she worked by lamplight, her movements efficient and practiced. "You are up early," he said from the doorway. She glanced at him. "You were snoring again." He laughed. "I was in my own loft this time. You cannot hold that against me. I can hear you from the barn. Then I apologize to your delicate ears." She snorted, a sound that was almost a laugh, and went back to her work. He joined her, taking up a second pitchfork, and they worked in comfortable silence until the sun rose and painted the eastern sky in shades of orange and pink. Later that morning, while they were repairing a section of fence that had rotted through, she said, "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Joke, all the time." He hammered a nail into the new post, considering, "Makes the work go faster, and life is hard enough without being grim about it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You live here alone." "I do. That must be lonely." He looked at her. She was focused on the fence, her hands busy with twine, but there was something tentative in the way she had said it, like she was testing the weight of the word. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Less so lately." She did not respond, but her ears twitched, and he thought maybe she was pleased. The summer deepened. The crops that had survived the late planting began to grow, and the work shifted from mending and preparing to tending and harvesting. Verna proved to have a talent for the vegetable garden. Under her care, the beans and squash flourished, and even the temperamental tomatoes began to ripen. He found himself watching her more often than he should. The way she moved through the garden, efficient and sure. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking. The way the sunlight caught the green of her skin and made it look like new leaves in spring. It was dangerous, he knew. She had made it clear she was not staying, that this was temporary. And even if she wanted to stay, even if he wanted her to, there was the matter of what the neighbors would say. The nearest farm was 2 miles away, and he had not seen old Garrett since spring, but word traveled. An orc living on his farm would be noticed eventually. He tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the work, on the rhythm of the days, but it was getting harder. One evening, as they sat at the table after supper, she said, "You never ask me where I came from. Figured you would tell me if you wanted to." She traced a knot in the wood with one finger. "I came from a clan in the northern hills. When I was 16, I left." He waited. "They wanted me to marry," she said quietly. "A man from another clan. It was a good match politically. I did not want it. So you left." "So I left." She looked up at him. "I have been walking ever since, taking work where I can find it, sleeping where I can, until I found your barn." "I am glad you did," he said. The words came out more earnest than he had intended. She blinked, and something shifted in her expression, something vulnerable and surprised. "You are strange," she said, but there was no bite to it. "So I have been told." She smiled then, a real smile, and it transformed her face. He felt something in his chest tighten and loosen all at once. The next week, trouble arrived in the form of Garrett from the neighboring farm. Yoren was in the field checking the wheat when he saw the old man's cart rattling up the road. Verna was in the garden, and he saw her stiffen when she noticed the visitor. "Stay there," he called to her. "I will handle this." He walked out to meet Garrett, who pulled the cart to a stop and climbed down with the careful movements of a man whose joints ached. Garrett was nearly 70, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that missed nothing. "Yoren," he said by way of greeting. "Garrett." "What brings you out this way?" The old man glanced past him toward the garden where Verna had gone very still. "Heard you had company. News travels fast. It does when the company is an orc." Garrett looked back at him. "What are you thinking, boy?" "I am thinking she needed a place to stay and I needed help with the farm. And when the magistrate hears about it, when the militia comes asking questions, she has done nothing wrong. There is no law against an orc working a farm. There is no law for it either." Garrett shook his head. "You are asking for trouble." "Then let trouble come," Yoren said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "She stays." Garrett studied him for a long moment, then he sighed. "You are as stubborn as your father was. I will take that as a compliment." The old man grunted, climbed back into his cart, and drove away without another word. Yoren watched him go, then turned back toward the garden. Verna was standing now, her arms crossed over her chest. "You should not have done that," she said when he reached her. "Done what?" "Defended me." "He will tell others." "Let him." "Yoren, Verna." He stopped in front of her. "You have been here 2 months. You work harder than anyone I have ever known. You have earned your place here. I am not going to throw you out because Garrett disapproves. It is not just him. It will be others. They will make your life difficult. My life has been difficult before. I will manage." She looked at him, and he could see the conflict in her eyes. Fear and gratitude and something else, something he did not dare name. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care?" "Because I am falling in love with you," he thought. But he did not say it. Instead, he said, "Because it is the right thing to do." It was true, but it was not the whole truth, and they both knew it. August came, and with it the first real harvest. The wheat was thin but serviceable, and the vegetable garden was abundant. They worked side by side, cutting and bundling, hauling baskets of beans and squash and tomatoes into the root cellar. It was hard work, satisfying work, and at the end of each day they were both too tired for conversation. But the silence between them had changed. It was charged now, electric. He caught her watching him sometimes, and when their eyes met she did not look away as quickly as she once had. One evening, as they sat on the porch steps after supper, she said, "I have been thinking about staying, not just until I figure out where I am going, actually staying." His heart kicked against his ribs. "Here." She was looking out at the fields, not at him. "If you would let me, Verna." He waited until she turned to face him. "I would like nothing more." She smiled, that same transforming smile, and he felt like he could breathe for the first time in days. But the next morning, everything changed. He woke to the sound of shouting. By the time he climbed down from his loft and stumbled outside, there were 3 men on horseback in his yard. He recognized one of them, Dane Hollies, the magistrate from the village 8 miles south. The other 2 wore the rough uniforms of the militia. Verna was standing near the barn, her hands clenched at her sides. One of the militiamen had his hand on the hilt of his sword. "What is going on here?" Yoren demanded. Dane turned to him. He was a fat man with a florid face, and he looked deeply uncomfortable. "Yoren, I am sorry about this, but we have had complaints." "Complaints about what?" "About you harboring an orc." Dane gestured toward Verna. "We have had reports that she has been living here, that you have been employing her. She works my farm. There is no law against that." "There is no law for it either," Dane said. "And feelings are running high in the village. People are nervous. They remember the raids from 10 years back. Those were clans from the far north. Verna had nothing to do with that." "Nevertheless," Dane dismounted with a grunt, "I am afraid I am going to have to ask her to move on, for everyone's peace of mind." Yoren stepped between Dane and Verna. "No." The militiaman's hand tightened on his sword. "That is not your decision to make, Fallow. It is my farm, my land. That makes it my decision." Dane held up a hand, forestalling the militiaman. "Yoren, be reasonable. If you resist, we will have to take action. I do not want that." "Then do not take action. Leave. Let me and my farmhand get back to work." "She is an orc. She is a person," Yoren said, his voice hard. "And she has done nothing wrong. If you want to remove her from my property, you will have to go through me." For a long moment, no one moved. The morning was very quiet, just the sound of the horses shifting and the distant cry of a crow. Then Verna stepped forward. "It is all right," she said. Her voice was steady. "I will go." "No, Yoren." She looked at him, and there was something fierce and sad in her eyes. "It is not worth fighting them, not worth getting yourself hurt." "I do not care, I do." She moved past him toward the barn. "I will get my things." He wanted to argue, wanted to plant himself in their path and dare them to move him. But he could see the militiaman's hand on his sword, could see the tension in Dane's face. If he pushed this, someone would get hurt. Probably him, but possibly Verna too. So he stood there, helpless and furious, while she climbed into the loft and came back down with her threadbare blanket and nothing else. She walked past him without looking at him, past Dane and the militiamen, and started down the road. "You are making a mistake," Yoren said to Dane. The magistrate sighed. "Maybe. But it is the mistake people want me to make." He climbed back onto his horse. "I am sorry, Yoren, I truly am." They rode away, leaving him standing alone in his yard. He did not go inside. He stood there for a long time, staring down the empty road. Then he walked into the barn, climbed up into the loft, and sat down in the hay where she had slept for the past 3 months. It still smelled like her. Like sun-warmed skin and honest work. He put his head in his hands and tried to think. The days that followed were gray and empty. He went through the motions of the work, but his heart was not in it. The fields felt too large, the house too quiet. At night he lay in his loft and stared at the ceiling, thinking about her out there somewhere, sleeping rough, walking toward nowhere. A week passed. Then another. The harvest continued, but it felt meaningless. What was the point of bringing in crops if there was no one to share them with? On the 15th day, he made his decision. He packed a rucksack with food and a change of clothes, closed up the house, and set out down the road. He did not know where she had gone, but there were only so many directions to walk. He would find her. He had to. He walked south first, toward the village, asking after her at every farmhouse and inn. No one had seen an orc woman traveling alone. He turned west, toward the river, and asked again. Nothing. He was beginning to despair when, on the third day, a tinker told him he had seen a green-skinned woman walking north along the old trade road. North. Back toward the hills she had come from. He turned north and walked faster. He found her 4 days later, camped in a grove of trees by the roadside. She had a small fire going and she was sitting beside it, staring into the flames. She looked thinner than she had when she left, and tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "You snore," he said. She jumped, spinning toward him. For a moment she just stared. Then she said, "You trespass." He laughed, and it felt like something in his chest unlocked. "Can I sit?" She nodded, and he lowered himself to the ground beside the fire. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then she said, "You should not be here, probably not. Your farm, the harvest, you are going to lose everything. Maybe," he looked at her, "or maybe I already lost what mattered when you walked away." She drew in a sharp breath. "Yoren, I love you," he said. The words came out simple and plain, no artifice, no charm, just the truth. "I have been falling in love with you since you complained about my snoring. I do not care that you are an orc. I do not care what the village thinks. I care about you and I want you to come home." "It is not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." "No." She shook her head. "No, it is not. They will come back. They will make your life unbearable. They might hurt you. Then we will deal with it together." "Why?" Her voice broke on the word. "Why would you risk everything for me? Because you are worth it." He reached out slowly and took her hand. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused from work. "Because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to see is you climbing down from the hayloft. Because the food tastes better when I share it with you. Because my life is better with you in it, and I do not want to go back to the way it was before." She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "I am afraid. So am I." He squeezed her hand. "But I am more afraid of losing you." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was in his arms, clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. He held her, his face pressed against her hair, and felt the pieces of himself slot back into place. "Come home," he whispered. "Yes," she said. "Yes." "All right." They walked back together, taking their time. The days were warm and the nights were cool, and they talked about everything and nothing. He learned that she liked thunderstorms and hated the color yellow. She learned that he had wanted to be a sailor when he was young, but his father's death had tied him to the farm. They talked about what they would do when they got back, how they would handle the village's disapproval. "We will be careful," he said. "We will keep our heads down and do the work. Eventually they will get used to it. And if they do not, then we will find another farm, another village, somewhere farther from people who care." She looked at him. "You would do that, leave your father's land. I would do that for you." She kissed him then, sudden and fierce, and he felt the world narrow down to just the two of them, to the heat of her mouth and the strength of her arms around him. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling. "You are a ridiculous man, Yoren Fallow. I have been told that before." They reached the farm on a bright afternoon in early September. The wheat stood tall in the fields, ready for the final harvest. The house looked exactly as he had left it, small and sturdy and waiting. Verna stopped in the yard, looking around. It feels different now. Different how? Like home. He took her hand. Then let us go inside. That evening they made a plan. They would finish the harvest together. They would go to the village and sell their crops, and they would be polite and civil to anyone who gave them trouble. They would prove through patience and persistence that Verna belonged here. It was not easy. The first time they went to the village together, people stared. Some turned away. A few muttered insults just loud enough to hear. But Yoren kept his hand on Verna's back, steady and sure, and they completed their business and left without incident. The second time was a little easier. The third time easier still. By the fourth visit, people were starting to nod to them in the street, and one of the shopkeepers even smiled at Verna. Progress, Yoren said as they drove the cart back to the farm. Slow progress. Still progress. The harvest was good that year, better than he had any right to expect given the rough start. They stored away enough food for the winter and sold the rest for a small profit. With the money, he bought Verna a real blanket, thick and warm, and a new set of clothes that actually fit. She cried when he gave them to her, and he held her and promised silently that he would give her 100 more gifts before he was done. Autumn deepened, and the work shifted again. They cut firewood for the winter, repaired the roof, and insulated the barn. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, and he taught her to read. She was a fast learner, impatient and determined, and by the time the first snow fell, she could work her way through the old storybook that had been his mother's. One night, as they sat together on the bench by the hearth, she said, "I love you too." He looked at her. "You do, I have for a while. I was just afraid to say it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am not afraid anymore." "Good." He kissed the top of her head. "Because I plan to keep saying it until you are thoroughly sick of hearing it." I do not think I could ever be sick of that. Winter came hard that year. The snow piled high, and the wind howled around the farmhouse like a living thing. They were snowed in for days at a time, but Yoren found he did not mind. The house was warm, the food was plentiful, and Verna was there. What more did he need? They fell into a new rhythm, one that felt easy and right. They cooked together, read together, talked late into the night about their pasts and their futures. She told him about her clan, about the mother who had tried to make her conform and the father who had looked the other way. He told her about losing his parents, about the weight of trying to keep the farm running alone. "You are not alone anymore," she said. "No," he pulled her closer. "I am not." One evening in deep winter, when the snow was falling thick and fast outside, he said, "Marry me." She looked up from the sock she was mending, her eyes wide. "What? Marry me?" He set down the piece of leather he had been working into a new harness and turned to face her fully. "I know it will not be official. No priest will marry an orc and a human, but we can do it ourselves. Make our own vows, bind ourselves to each other." "Yoren, you do not have to answer now," he said quickly. "Think about it, but I want you to know that I am serious. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to grow old with you." She set down her mending and crossed to him. She took his face in her hands and kissed him, slow and deep. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They married themselves on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. There was no one to witness but the fire and the stars. He took her hands in his and spoke his vows simply. "I promise to stand beside you, to work with you, to care for you. I promise to love you every day, in good times and bad. I promise to make you laugh when you are sad, and to hold you when you need holding. I am yours, Verna Prawl, for as long as we both live." She spoke her own vows, her voice steady and sure. "I promise to trust you, to stand with you, to build a life with you. I promise to love you with everything I have. I promise to call this place home and to make it a home for us both. I am yours, Yoren Fallow, until the end of my days." They sealed their vows with a kiss, and he felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. That night, she did not climb up to the hayloft. She climbed the ladder to his loft instead, and they lay together under the thick blanket he had bought her, listening to the wind outside and the crackle of the fire below. "You are going to snore," she said, "probably. I will complain." "I expect nothing less." She laughed, a sound he would never tire of hearing, and curled against him. He wrapped his arms around her and closed his eyes. Spring came slowly, as it always did, but when it arrived it was glorious. The snow melted, the fields turned green, and the world smelled like new growth and possibility. Yoren and Verna worked together to prepare for planting, turning the soil, spreading manure, checking the irrigation ditches. One afternoon, as they were planting seeds in the vegetable garden, Garrett appeared again. He climbed down from his cart and walked over to them, moving carefully. "Yoren, Verna." He nodded to each of them in turn. "Garrett." Yoren straightened, wary. "What brings you out this way?" "Came to apologize." The old man looked uncomfortable. "I was wrong about you too, wrong to tell Dane about her staying here. I have been watching over the winter, seeing how you worked together, how you weathered the hard months. You are a good match, a strong team." Verna blinked, clearly surprised. Yoren felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you," he said. "That means a lot." "And I wanted to say," Garrett continued, "if anyone gives you trouble, you let me know. I will set them straight." "I appreciate that." Garrett nodded, climbed back into his cart, and drove away. Verna watched him go, then turned to Yoren. "Did that just happen?" "I think it did." She shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. "Miracles never cease. The planting went well that year. The rains came on time, and the seeds sprouted quickly. By midsummer, the fields were lush and green, and the vegetable garden was thriving. Yoren and Verna worked from dawn to dusk, but the work felt good, purposeful. They had visitors occasionally now. Garrett stopped by every few weeks to check on them. A few of the younger farmers from nearby holdings came to ask Yoren's advice on various matters and stayed to talk. They were polite to Verna, and some even asked her opinion on gardening or livestock. It was not perfect. There were still people in the village who would not look at them, who muttered darkly about the dangers of mixing with orcs. But the open hostility had faded, replaced by a wary tolerance that Yoren could work with. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch steps watching the sun set, Verna said, "I never thought I could have this." "Have what?" "A home, a partner, a place where I belong." She looked at him. "You gave me that. We gave each other that," he said. "I was just as lost before you came along." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange and pink and purple. Harvest came again, and this time it was abundant. The wheat was tall and golden, the vegetables plentiful. They worked side by side, cutting and gathering, and when the work was done they stood in the middle of the field and surveyed what they had accomplished. "We did well," Verna said. "We did." He took her hand. "We make a good team, the best." They sold their surplus in the village, and this time no one muttered insults. A few people even congratulated them on the fine quality of their produce. Yoren bought Verna a new pair of boots with part of the profit, and she bought him a new hat to replace the one that had been eaten by the goat. That winter was easier than the last. They had more food stored away, more firewood cut, and they knew what to expect. They spent the long evenings by the fire, reading and talking and planning for the next year. "We should expand the garden," Verna said one night. "Maybe add more rows of beans. They sold well last year. And I want to try planting oats in the south field. The wheat does not do as well there, but oats might thrive." They made lists, drew diagrams, argued good-naturedly about the best way to arrange things. It was domestic and mundane and perfect. One night, as they lay together in the loft, Verna said, "Do you ever wish things were different? That I was human and we could have a normal life?" "No," he turned to face her. "I love you exactly as you are, and this is a normal life. It is our life, and that is all that matters." She smiled, but there was something wistful in it. "I cannot give you children," he frowned. "What do you mean? Orcs and humans. We cannot have children together, our bodies are too different." He had not known that. The information settled into him, heavy and strange. He thought about it for a moment, then said, "Then we will not have children. That does not change anything." "You do not want them, I want you," he said firmly. "Everything else is secondary." She kissed him then, fierce and grateful, and he held her close. Spring came around again, and they planted their expanded garden and the new oat field. The work was hard but satisfying. They had found their rhythm now, a perfect balance of effort and rest, of labor and leisure. One afternoon in early summer, as they were working in the garden, a young woman appeared at the edge of the field. She was human, dressed in traveling clothes, and she looked nervous. "Excuse me," she called. "Are you Yoren Fallow?" Yoren straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "I am." "Can I help you? My name is Alyssa. I am from the village to the east. I heard that you employ an orc on your farm." Verna tensed beside him, but Yoren kept his voice calm. "I do. This is my wife, Verna." Alyssa's eyes widened slightly at the word wife, but she did not comment. "I have an orc friend. He is looking for work. I thought maybe you would know if there were any farms willing to hire him." Yoren and Verna exchanged a glance. Then Verna said, "What kind of work is he looking for?" "Anything, really. He is strong and willing to learn." "Tell him to come by," Yoren said. "We can always use help during harvest season, and I know a few other farmers who might be willing to give him a chance." Alyssa's face lit up. Thank you so much." She left, and Verna turned to Yoren. "You are going to start a trend, you know. Orcs working on human farms. Would that be so bad?" "No," she smiled. "It would be wonderful." Over the next few years, more orcs came to the area, drawn by word that there was work and tolerance to be found. Not everyone welcomed them, but enough did. Yoren and Verna became known as the couple who had started it all, and their farm became a gathering place for those who believed in bridging the divide. They grew older together, their bodies marked by the years of hard work. Yoren's back troubled him more as he aged, and Verna's hands ached on cold mornings. But they faced each new day together, and the farm thrived under their care. One summer evening, when they were both well into their 40s, they sat on the porch steps as they had so many times before. The fields were green and lush, the garden bursting with life. In the barn, the loft held nothing but hay now. Verna had not slept there in nearly 20 years. "You remember the first thing you said to me?" Verna asked. "You snore," Yoren said with a grin. "And what did you say back?" "You trespass," she laughed. "I did, and you let me stay anyway. Best decision I ever made." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Mine too." They sat in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The air was warm, the evening peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, and the breeze carried the scent of growing things. "We built something good here," Verna said quietly. "We did." Yoren squeezed her hand. "Together." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he felt the weight of her, solid and real and beloved. The years stretched behind them, full of work and laughter and love. The years stretched ahead, uncertain but not frightening. They had each other. They had their farm. They had their life. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and Yoren and Verna moved through them with the ease of long practice. They knew when to plant and when to harvest, when to rest, and when to push. They knew each other's rhythms, each other's needs, the small kindnesses that made the hard days bearable. Other couples came and went from the area, but they remained. The farm was theirs, rooted deep in the soil, and they were part of it as much as it was part of them. One autumn, many years after that first meeting in the hayloft, they stood together in the middle of the wheat field, golden grain swaying around them in the breeze. Yoren's hair was more gray than brown now, and Verna's face bore the lines of a life well lived. "Remember when you could not even swing a scythe properly?" Yoren teased. "Remember when you could not cook porridge without burning it?" Verna shot back. They grinned at each other, and then he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She fit against him perfectly, as she always had. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For trespassing in my barn, for staying, for loving me. Thank you for not throwing me out, for seeing me when others looked away, for making me believe I could have a home." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the middle of their field, surrounded by the fruits of their labor. The sun was warm on their backs, and the world was full of golden light. Finally, they pulled apart and got back to work. There was always work to be done on a farm, and they did it together, as they had for decades. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, they walked back to the house hand in hand. Smoke curled from the chimney, and inside the fire was burning warm and bright. They crossed the threshold together, into the home they had built, into the life they had chosen. Behind them, the barn stood quiet, the hayloft empty of everything but memories. And in the morning they would wake and do it all again, together, always together.